Good afternoon and welcome to our Tech Talk webinar. We're happy to have you here today. My name is Eden and I'm on the marketing team here at Sunset Learning. We have two panelists with us today. Russell Hughes is a senior technical instructor at Sunset Learning, and Shawn Jones is the COO at SDN Pros, Arista's exclusive Elite Plus training partner. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A so we can make sure that we answer them for you. And I'll hand it over to Russell and Shawn.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Russell Hughes. Like Eden said, I am here as an instructor from Sunset Learning. I am teaching some of the Arista Cloud Engineer classes and certification courses. Have Shawn Jones here with me just so that we can kind of go through if we have any questions that I might not be able to answer, but Shawn might be. I'm going to ask him a couple questions as well, just to kind of make him get in on the conversation as well. So Shawn, thanks for joining with us.
Absolutely. Thrilled to be here. Hi, everyone.
So just kind of to get started a little bit, I wanted to make sure everyone was kind of aware of what the Cloud Engineer certification was all about. You'll see there are 7 quote unquote levels that you have, but as when Shawn and I were discussing this, we were kind of just talking about the idea that it's not necessarily a straight ladderish, if you will, okay? A communication of what you want to get for different levels is kind of more of almost a diamond shape, if you will, kind of reconverging back up at the top at level 6 and level 7. So we're going to kind of discuss that here in a little bit. The idea of the level 1, level 2, level 3, and then from there kind of diverts. Okay, so you'll see that it kind of goes from automation and level 5 versus service provider and level 4. So we'll kind of see each one of that, and then kind of comes back together in level 6, which is more of a design type of concept that they have, and all lab. Okay, so just kind of going through, I want to show you the basic overview of the different ACE levels we have and the courses that are out there, and obviously a little bit about each one of these courses as well. We're going to go through and talk about where to sign up for exams, and then kind of what the exams are going to be like, right? Interesting, when I got into Arista, I'm used to the idea of seeing question and answer type of tests that we have, right? Microsoft and Novell, Cisco, Juniper, every vendor I've ever been with has always been more of a come and take the exam where it's question answer. Okay, so you had multiple choice, you had multiple answers. Some even had little testlets, if you will, or configlets where you had to go through and actually configure a router or switch. Right. The interesting part about all Arista classes and all Arista certifications are that they're practical exams. You've got to actually be on the equipment. You've got to be able to do your job. And that's one of the things that I feel is really kind of one of the benefits of having an ACE certification as well. Right? The fact that you've had to go through and display that you can indeed do that job. Right? That's the point of it. So we're going to kind of go through and start off a little bit here. I'm going to start with ACE level 1. And again, when you look at the ACE level 1, really kind of an entry level type of class that we have. Some networking fundamentals that you're going to go through. You're going to see that's kind of the basics of the EOS, like kind of fundamentals, again, how to log in, what enable mode or privilege mode is all about versus the entry mode that you have available for us. They're going to then talk about things like layer 2 operations. So think basic MAC address information, right? How switches actually learn MAC addresses, how they build that MAC address table. A little bit about spanning tree is involved within there. So we'll discuss a little bit of spanning tree. We eventually get into some layer 3 operations. What is routing? How does that routing work? What do you actually do as far as OSPF is concerned within there? They eventually then get into a little bit of leaf spine architecture as well. Right? Not real deep dive in it by any means whatsoever. It's kind of more of an introduction to that data center architecture that we're looking for. It eventually gets into some campus architecture information, what you'd see in the Wi-Fi environment, what do you see in the enterprise type of environment as well. And then they kind of spattered across all of the first couple courses, right? Cloud Vision, okay? Cloud Vision is Arista's management portal, if you will, go through and make changes to the entire network, being able to go through and verify that things are up and running, that everything's working correctly. It's where we can go through and add in information that you'll see a lot later on when we get into more level 2, level 3 environment. They really discuss more and more about cloud vision. You get kind of more of a deep dive of what you're going to see in each one of them. But kind of want to have that introduction in every single one of these courses. And one of the reasons we did that is kind of the concept that we're not really sure where everyone's going to jump in. Okay. I kind of think of the ACE level 1. I would assume that most of you guys have probably taken some other kind of vendors, equipment, or tests that are out there. I've dealt a lot with Cisco systems. So when it comes to like the Cisco courses, I kind of equate the idea of it. Obviously, it's not any kind of one-to-one type of matchup by any means whatsoever. And Arista's really tried their best to make sure it's not a direct comparison to what Cisco is doing. And so think of the ACE level 1 as kind of like more of a CENT type of environment that they got, that entry network technician that most people are looking for. And again, when you look into the idea that I might already have certifications from other vendors, maybe a lot of this entry level stuff is probably a little bit maybe too entry level for you. So you may not ever even go to an ACE level 1 course if you feel comfortable with all of that information. Right? So we want to make sure that you've got an introduction to cloud vision, and again, also give you as much time as we possibly can for you to be able to play around within cloud vision as well. Right? So even if you do come to the ACE level 1, the idea that you're introduced to in cloud vision to in ACE level 1, in ACE level 2, in ACE level 3, and in level 5, you're almost primarily utilizing cloud vision for a lot of that information that we're actually dealing with. So want to make sure that we got plenty of time to be able to play around with it. So kind of one of the things we start to deal with. Going on to ACE level 2, again, kind of more of a CCNA-ish feel, if you will. The focus more on a layer 2 leaf spine type of a design inside a data center. And again, kind of going through and showing you the different modules that we'll see. We've got the EOS command line interface, troubleshooting tools that we have available. Again, getting into more cloud vision, some of the ways we can use cloud vision to implement, to automate, to be able to play with our network itself. And again, kind of getting away from that idea of having to go through to each and every single individual device and configuring everything by hand via the command line interface. Then we get into more of the cloud networking, really focusing on that layer 2 leaf spine type of environment. Right? So think that we're dealing with the idea of link aggregation and MLAG that we have available for us. Really the focus going to be more on MLAG as a design in that data center in that case. They give you kind of an introduction into a layer 3 leaf spine as well. So we talk about some routing protocols within here with OSPF and ISIS. A little bit of an introduction to BGP. I kind of think of it as a little BGP 101, if you will, right? What the attributes in BGP actually are. And eventually then, how is that used in a data center with a leaf spine type of configuration? Right? How do we actually build what we like to call the overlay design process within there? So we're just really kind of setting you up, if you will, to get into the ACE level 3. Right? Obviously, all of these are building on each other. We eventually then get into some security. So we'll talk about LANs, we'll talk about DANs. So a lot of different security features that we have available for us at Arista. And then finally get into the cognitive campus. So this is where we start dealing with a lot of Wi-Fi. Some fundamentals from wireless information, an introduction to Wi-Fi 6. We go through and talk about the idea of configuration tools that we have available for campus Wi-Fi, and a little bit about the physical hardware that you're going to see inside that campus as well. Going on to ACE level 3, which is really more focused on that layer 3 architecture in a leaf spine type of design. And again, immediately starting off with some cloud vision. Right? We kind of, again, want to go through and make sure not only that you have time to be able to utilize Cloud Vision, but show you a little deeper dive into each individual section that we have available for Cloud Vision. So the change control aspect of it, going through and adding in users and dealing with the idea of user roles within here. You'll see a lot of, again, configlet builders. We'll deal with the idea of rollback. We deal with the idea of image management. Obviously, going through and discussing some things like snapshots. We will also go through and start to configure a bunch of different things inside Cloud Vision. So a lot of this class kind of really focuses on using Cloud Vision throughout the entire environment itself to make your changes on all of your devices. And kind of interesting, when you get into Cloud Vision, obviously you can still go into the command line interfaces, right? You can make your changes on each individual device one at a time. But really, in my opinion, once you start utilizing Cloud Vision, the idea should be that you do all your changes in Cloud Vision, right? It kind of feels like if you want to make your changes on the command line interface, you've got to then update Cloud Vision to make sure it's up to date as well. So it's much easier if you just keep on making your changes in Cloud Vision rather than going to the command line interface. We eventually then get into some, again, cloud networking using a level 3 or a layer 3 leaf spine environment. So again, building that underlay, building the overlay environment. We go through an overview of OSPF and ISIS, and again, a BGP 101 type of environment. Learning those attributes in BGP and the process of BGP doing its path selection process. Then we get into the nuts and bolts of it, okay? So we start off kind of in the data plane environment where we're dealing with the idea of virtual extensible LANs that we have. And this is the concept of extending a VLAN from one location to another location where we no longer have trunking to get from one switch to another switch. Now we're using a routing protocol to get from one switch to another switch. And VXLAN in the data plane allows me to take a layer 2 frame, encapsulate it in an IP packet that can then be routed through our underlay environment. And so we're really going to see in here not only how VXLANs actually work and how to implement them, but then we're going to see in this section, they kind of go through the different types of control plane information that we look for, okay? One of the big things you look for whenever you deal with any kind of a VLAN, a layer 2 environment, is how do we learn MAC addresses and where do I flood traffic, okay? So in a normal layer 2 environment, learning MAC addresses is done via data plane learning. Right? I write down the source MAC address and the port it came in on. And that's how these switches build their MAC address table. Eventually, then we say, if I got to send out broadcast traffic or unknown unicast traffic or multicast traffic, right, I have to flood that out every interface that is a part of that VLAN. Well, now we're talking about the idea that that VLAN is chunked up from different devices, different leaf nodes, maybe even different data centers that are connected together using a layer 3 environment. So it's all routed. So we have to have some control plane that allows us to say, which one of these devices are actually participating in this VXLAN, right? Where do I send that flooded traffic outbound, that bum traffic that we were discussing? How do I flood that outbound everywhere? So you're going to see we have different options available for us, and kind of approach that some other vendors have taken using multicast. We'll talk about the idea of going through creating a static, what we call a flood list that we utilize. Right? Eventually then getting into the idea of utilizing an orchestrator, if you will, right? It's a server that we have, VCS, and then we can actually go through and have each individual leaf node, it registers to VCS, and immediately upon learning a local MAC address, advertises that information to VCS, okay? And then VCS tells all the other devices about that. Now, that approach uses, obviously, an external server, a controller that does that information. So what we're looking for, again, is more of a, how do we get that process to happen on an open standards type of platform? And this is where we introduce the idea of EVPN. It's a multi-protocol BGP and EVPN and how it advertises and builds that dynamic flood list. It allows us to advertise MAC address information from one switch to another switch through that underlay environment, okay? We eventually then take a deep dive into EVPN. We're going to talk about the different route types that we have available for us and how do we advertise that information using multi-protocol BGP and the address family of EVPN. Eventually, we get into some multicasting. So we'll talk about some PIM and we'll talk about some IGMP available for us and how those work together to be able to get multicast traffic through our network. How do we build either what we would call a source-based tree or a shared-based tree that we're utilizing at any given point? How do you set up rendezvous points? How do you do things like bootstrap router? We eventually get into some quality of service. QoS, I'm always of the opinion when quality of service that it's more of a, how do I even put it? I like to put it as managed unfairness of bandwidth, if you will, right? You're going through and saying you're prioritizing your individual applications. What applications need specific amount of bandwidth, a minimum amount of delay, a minimum amount of jitter, a minimum amount of packet loss, and we're prioritizing them on the network. Now, if you think about doing that, if I'm going through and I'm saying, hey, I'm giving voice and video 30 to 40% of my interface bandwidth, well, that's at the detriment of all the other routed traffic that we have on that network, right? So it's kind of a give and take. I'm prioritizing this at the same time deprioritizing other types of traffic. So you really got to give that give and take type of an idea when you look at quality of service. So it's all about the idea of how do we set up queuing structures that we utilize, how do we go through and do things like traffic classes, how do we utilize what we call the MQC, the modular quality of service command line interface. So we're going to give you a pretty good introduction to the idea of quality of service. Again, going through some more security stuff that we have available for us. So more in-depth as far as the security is concerned. And again, going through some more advanced campus infrastructure, more Wi-Fi that we look for and how to be able to utilize that. Okay. So ACE level 3, in my opinion, probably a pretty good CCNP level-ish, wouldn't you say, Shawn, somewhere around in there?
Yes, again, we don't have a direct one-to-one, but absolutely this is on par with that.
Yeah, it's a much more advanced class than the ACE level 1 and ACE level 2, right? Like I said, really focusing on a lot of BGP-ish information that we're looking for in this particular class. So personally, I love teaching this course. So then we get into ACE level 4, and this is kind of where it diverges. Like I said, no longer really this straight ladder, if you will, that you're climbing up these different levels, right? So you kind of, after level 3, kind of splits. Okay, ACE level 4 goes through more of like a service provider, an MPLS type of configuration that we're looking for, versus level 5 being more automation, okay, for the data center itself. So we're going to see that in the ACE level 4, they go through and discuss the idea of MPLS concepts. How does label switching actually work? What are we doing in that concept within label switching? Get into some of the architecture that we use. So again, going to talk about the idea of virtual route forwarders within here and how a service provider uses those to keep different customers completely separate from each other in an MPLS environment. How do we add to that environment services VRF? Right, services VRFs might be an idea of maybe I'm running a DHCP server for different locations. Maybe I've got managed services that we're dealing with, managed CE devices. How do we get to that idea that the service part of the provider themselves can access your individual devices? Think of managed voice over IP environment that you might potentially have available for you. So how do I create that services VRF and allow multiple customers to connect to the exact same service at any given time, okay? We'll eventually then talk about some things like some transport models. How do we get that data across the network? Is it layer 2 or is it layer 3 that we're adding? We get into more of a deep dive on those individual services. You see a lot of one of the big concepts they have in this ACE level 4 would be the idea of Ethernet segment routing, okay, is a big deal for us within here. So we want to make sure that we can recognize how to do that. And it's in lieu of how we used to do essentially traffic engineering in an MPLS environment, okay? Being able to utilize concepts that don't necessarily need things like label distribution protocol and RSVP. How do we get away from those kind of niche protocols and utilize multi-protocol BGP for it? Okay. And then again, more of transport and services optimization at the end of that, right? How do I really make sure everything works together and is cohesive to be a scalable approach at a service provider environment? Okay. And then ACE level 5, more on network automation. And you're going to see in this network automation, they go through and talk about automation and net ops. And there's a long discussion on what happens within here and how the APIs actually work and what is an API and how are we actually adding in information, Puppet and Ansible, and you get into some YAML and some JSON within here. So it's a lot of automation that we're looking for. Obviously, that's the main concept, the main objective that we're looking for with inside the ACE level 5. And then how to do that along with Cloud Vision. Oops, I made a spelling error there. I apologize for everyone. And then we kind of get into the next two. So this is where it comes kind of back into that diamond shape at the very top. ACE level 6 and ACE level 7, really exam only type of communication. Okay. So ACE level 6 is more of a design type of an aspect. The idea is that they're going to give to you a quote unquote RFP. Okay. So you've got to go through and it's with fictitious companies that they have that are all based off of real life scenarios. And you've got to come up with a design. What kind of hardware are you going to be looking for? What kind of configuration are you looking at? What would you recommend to the customer to be able to keep this up? Bandwidth requirements that we're looking for, right? And so to really kind of fine tune and make your design optimized for each and every single individual customer that might be out there, right? And can you do that for us and come up with this environment where we're always constantly looking for you to do this, not just for one customer, but for multiple customers, okay? Is it a repeatable process that we have? And Shawn, ACE level 6 and 7 are relatively new, right? So what else can you expand as far as ACE level 6 for me?
Brand new, actually. It was publicly released just a few months ago. So with level 6, don't be scared by hearing RFP if that's not something you've done or do in your current job. The example of an RFP is what we're using through this design process. But ultimately what we're looking for is that you can use the knowledge gained from ACE levels 3, 4, and 5, be able to essentially create or upgrade, help somebody upgrade their topology, their data centers, and then be able to speak to it. So there is a board that's required for this where you essentially defend your response.
So not necessarily any kind of configuration on the routers and switches, but again, it's more the idea of us going through and coming up with a design, having that design not only approved, but then again, kind of defending why you chose what you chose in that design, right?
Absolutely. And some other questions that the board may present to you, such as, actually, we decided to go from 10 new switches to 20 new set switches. How does that change your design? You know, kind of some off the cuff questions there. Again, it's putting the knowledge you've gained from the previous 3 levels into this one to understand if you can go out and do this yourself. Again,
fascinating, and this is one of those that takes a while, right? It's not a one-day test. This is over the course of what, a month, right?
45 days total.
45?
So, yep. So a candidate will come in and tell us they're interested in this. They want to start. The first thing we're going to do is look 45 days out or thereabouts and find a date for your board. We'll count backwards from there, and you actually have 30 full days from the day you receive the RFP request to the day you have to actually turn in the response.
And then you come back and defend your work against the board, right?
Correct. Approximately 2 weeks after that. Yep.
And then let's see, last but not least, we have level 7, which I threw in here again, and it's an exam, but it's all about configuration at this point, right? So there's configuration in the command line interface. There's configuration in CVP. There's configuration using automation that we're looking for. And it's configuring everything from the campus environment to the data center environment throughout. Wi-Fi, everything's added into it. So again, it's kind of everything all at once type of environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Three main parts to this. You hit on them correctly. CLI, cloud vision, and automation. What's unique about this is that in trying to figure out how to get all three of those parts tested, we're looking at 3 separate days, 3 Fridays in a row. Come in, spend 6 to 8 hours on one part, and if you pass, you come back for the next Friday. So this is everything, absolutely everything.
And I've had a lot of people try and tell me that this is like a CCIE. In my opinion, way more involved than a CCIE, right? I feel like if you could be level 7 certified, that you should be able to pass your CCIE in multiple forms, right? Not just one like enterprise, but you should probably get multiple CCIEs as far as I'm concerned, right? Very extensive as far as what we're looking for in a level 7 certification.
Correct. And again, not multiple choice, completely hands-on practical lab. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but what another differentiator of these exams through Arista is everything's open book. So that's got to tell you how difficult actually configuring everything really can be.
And that's one of the things I'm going to get to right now, right? The idea of, first off, kind of what those tests are actually like. We mentioned the idea that these tests, all practical exams. Okay, so it's no multiple choice. There's nothing, you're not going to get in there and have questions that are going to be trying to fool you to pick the wrong answer within there. It's all about, can I do the configuration and do the work? And it's why it seems so valuable to me, right? The idea that as someone who does go through and employ different people, I know that if you've got a certain level of certification in Arista, that I know you can absolutely do the work that is claimed to be tested on in that particular level, right? Which is so important about it. And why these are out there, again, Arista's whole approach is the idea that if you're in the test, you should have all the ability to be able to do anything that you would be able to do in a normal situation if you were at some customer's environment, right? So you can go through and jump on Google. It's an open book environment. You can go through and look at things like what do we have for a lab guide. Okay, so to help you configure it, again, completely open book. You've got complete access to the internet, right? The idea is that if you can get it done in the time range that is given, good enough, right? That's what we're really looking for.
Absolutely, time is the deciding factor in all of these exams.
And that's the thing, right? Although you have all the access everywhere, if you don't have the knowledge to be able to do it to begin with, you can Google things all day long. You're not going to get done with the test within the allotted amount of time.
That's right.
That's kind of why we're saying, hey, you've got everything available. If you know how to look it up real quick, you can go through and look it up real quick, right? But it's going to be more of that idea of remind me how to do it rather than show me how to do it and let me figure it all out while I'm in the test.
Right. If we're asking you to configure BGP, that's obviously not something you're going to quickly Google search, but while configuring BGP, you may need to Google search how to route traffic from one place to another based on the way the scenario is presented. Yep.
Sure. Or you forget a command or something like that. It'd be easy to look that command up, right? Yep. Is it a dash or a space or whatever it may be, right? Although you can use question mark, right? Maybe you forgot what the actual command was. How did it begin, right? So it's one of those things where if I can do a real quick lookup to remind me of what it is that I need to configure, something I can do, okay? So great way of being able to run the tests as well. I love the way Arista actually goes through and implements testing information. And again, where you're seeing that's throughout, right? That's from level 1 to level 7. All of these are open book, open internet type of tests that we can take, right?
That's right. And all practical in nature.
Yeah. So again, really giving you this idea of what's going on and do I really know exactly what it is I'm talking about? Okay. So I see that there are a couple questions here. Hang on one second. So questions about a little bit about how are they administered? Okay. So just kind of showing you a few different things. If you jump out on SDN Pros website out over here, okay, you'll see that when we look into this, they got you can log in, but if you go into the core, they show you the certifications that you have, and they'll show you what the core actually means to us within here, all the different costs for it, and then how to actually register to get certified for it. Okay, so you can go through on SDN Pros to be able to go through and find out what's going on within the evaluation, how to actually get your approach to it. Where do you actually certify for it? Again, you got to go through and register yourself within here. You'll eventually have to go through a submit, and you'll pick your day of when you can do that, when we've got the allotted open space to be able to take a test. But essentially, these are all administered via a Zoom meeting. You've got a Zoom proctor that you're dealing with. They give you the test. They give you access into the lab environment that you're going to go through and do your configurations for. As you go through and start to make your changes, you do have the availability to even ask your proctor questions. Although they didn't help me a whole lot, right? I didn't really ask a whole lot of questions on them either. Right? What they did was, it was more about not giving me any kind of answers, but like, for instance, I asked a question, I went through and did it. They didn't read the entire test, and I started using a different, the wrong IP addressing scheme. And I went through and asked them about that. And my proctor went through and said, you know what? They're not necessarily looking specifically on exact IP addressing scheme. As long as it works, if your IP addressing scheme works, and they may ask you about that, right? When they go through and test, when they're going through and trying to grade your test, if you will. And Shawn, maybe you can go through and give us a little insight about what's going on. How do they actually grade those tests?
Yeah, so since all the exams are practical, we have some unique challenges in grading as well. Grading has to be practical, right? We've done our best to create some grading scripts in the background to check for certain things we're asking for in scenarios. But as you know, and everybody else knows, there may be a different way of doing something. BGP routing comes to mind. There's 10 different ways to route BGP, depending on which way you want to send traffic, which traffic it becomes priority, that sort of thing. So the script can't handle all of it. But that gives us a baseline of, did you answer the scenario based on what we're asking for, when we're asking for it? And then after that, it's actually down to people looking at the exam submissions. I'm one of those, along with somebody at Arista, the lab team at Arista, and we manually grade every exam. With the IP example you used, another thing to mention here is that we don't fail for typos. If you've configured properly and you fat fingered 129 instead of 192, it's going to throw something back. It's going to throw an error back and say something's wrong here. We're going to look at it and move on. We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for completeness and the knowledge that you can configure.
So even just a small little mishap, something like that, not going to necessarily throw you out. Right?
Yep, absolutely. And there's one more level on top of this. This is very interesting to a lot of folks, is that through the automatic scripting grading, where we can find immediate passes and fails, then the person check, in which we manually check those that are in the middle and pass or fail. The last bucket is, you were close. You don't deserve to have to be told to come back again. Let's talk to you. Let's get you on the phone. Let's have a proctored session. Let's bring up this part of the scenario and your part of the config and see if you can find it. We'll throw some hints and questions and kind of walk you through it. We're not going to point it out for you, but it's another way to end up with a passing grade if you were very close to passing in general. Maybe
you can demonstrate the idea that you understand the underlying concept of it, right?
Correct. Using BGP as an example again, maybe you've configured everything correctly on your border leafs, on your leafs, you've got traffic passing, but you've missed out one command that routes traffic from leaf 1 to leaf 4. Why should we force you to go through the exam again? So Arista has taken this approach very seriously and thought long and hard about it.
And I'm just looking in this case, I've got a couple more questions here. How do we get more lab time? Shawn, is there any other way to get more lab time to practice on things like level 2, level 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So every course you attend, lab time is included. Another differentiator here is we include 3 weeks of lab time with every course, ACE levels 1 through 5, by the way, that we're talking about. There's no courses for 6 and 7. But there's the ability to purchase additional lab time after that if you just need it for review, if you're looking at you need more time, whatever the case is. But with the 3 weeks you get originally with an IoT session, that's 1 week for the class and 2 weeks after. So you do have plenty of time there.
And in most classes, they have the availability to go to any one of the given labs in that class. So you can do that one individual lab. So even though through the class, it kind of builds up on on that equipment, right? They've got the ability to be able to say, hey, let's revert back to this spot and be able to do lab number 4 over again.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Level 3 is a good example of that. So in level 3, you'll see that we teach BGP, VXLAN, EVPN, and there's 4 or 5 labs that correspond to those 3 topics. They're big labs, they're big topics. But if you need to start in the middle because you're picking up a week later, if you need to revert, whatever the case is, we've got built-in configurates that allow you to go back and forth because those labs do build on each other. You'll see that during the training as well. You'll build BGP on one day and come back and do VXLAN the next day, and you still need your BGP config in there in order to build the next piece of that. And with that question, talking about the options for lab time, everything's here on the site that Russell's showing. Obviously, we're trying to focus on certifications today, but under the training dropdown, there's a what's it called? If you could hover over the training dropdown there, bundles and add-ons, you'll find additional lab time there.
Just kind of showing you where you're looking for instructor led. Right, these are all that.
Yep, we've got quite a few bundles if you're looking to take multiple courses, but down towards the bottom is our lab options. By the way, to go back to core and exams real quick, just so that it's not too confusing there. Arista's tried to rebrand from exams to core, simply because we think the term exam means something specific. And Russell's touched on this quite a few times today already, where it's a multiple choice exam, essentially memorization. This is not that. So we're looking we looked at creating actual evaluations that get you ready for your job either now or later. So that's why we rebranded this cloud operational readiness evaluations. So if you see it, if you're on the site, it means the same thing. We're just trying to use the readiness evaluations acronym over exam wherever possible.
Which is great because it's not an exam. I mean, if it's anything, it's practical, right? And that's why it's about the idea of readiness evaluations. And again, it's not about the idea of necessarily pass and fail. There's some gray areas that are in there that definitely need to be looked at by multiple people to say, is this something that this person should probably have passed this or not, right? So yep. Yeah, it's great. I'm going back to just trying to show you guys the bundles and add-ons here. You were talking about way down in the bottom here, where you can get to these are expert bundles, and again, you get to the spot where you can get more lab time. Okay, yep. So you got 40 hours, 80 hours of lab time. All right, so there you go, more than. You can go up to that 100 and 240 hours of lab time that you have available for us, right? Yep.
And there's a couple things built into the bundles as well. If you're looking at multiple courses, you can then add on more lab time for those courses. If you're coming in to prep for expert, you could go straight to an expert bundle along with more lab time, that sort of thing. So core
absolutely.
Prep. Yep. I want to answer one more thing live while we're talking about this. Is the ACE Level 3 test more focused on building something new or fixing something that broke in the lab? This is an excellent question. And to answer that, none of these exams are built on anything broken. Everything is meant to be new configuration by you. So every scenario that you're given, you essentially start with blank switches. Obviously, the management stuff is on there because these are all virtual switches. Everything's hosted in GCP. So we've got the basics there for you, but you're going to always start fresh and build based on the level and the scenario that you receive for that week.
Then I see a couple of people said here, what are the future prospects for getting Arista certified? Well, I would say after getting Arista certified, again, It depends on what company you're going to, right? Does that company care about Arista? Are they going to go to Arista later on? Right. So again, I would look at the idea that what are your prospects of getting certification in any given vendor's equipment, right? Obviously, it depends on where it is you're trying to go. So
yeah, I'd go a little bit further. A lot of vendors have quite a bit of proprietary information in their courses and their exams. Arista's going to have some of that as well. There's obviously their training needs to revolve around their products and their customers, right? But Arista is very open source when it comes to some of the technologies they use. Let's talk about EVPN for a second. If you came in and took an Arista certification course and passed it, level 3 with EVPN in there, you can go do EVPN wherever you need to do EVPN. It doesn't mean it's EVPN on an Arista switch for an Arista customer.
yeah, and that's really
that's something good
Arista's
too.
approach, right? Is try and be
Yep.
as much open source as we possibly can.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Got
So
a
I'm
lot coming
seeing,
in now.
yeah. Feel free to answer any of them that you want to, Shawn.
Sure. Is there any option to have an exam at a time of day other than 11 a.m. in one of the 3 world time zones? So what we're doing right now is just about every Wednesday, there is an exam that is run at that time, 11 a.m. in that local time. And we've added Saturdays as well recently. Because these are proctored over Zoom online, there's no place to go for them. And because we need the proctors available for them, a lot of which are instructors of these courses, those are currently the only available options. So either Wednesdays or Saturdays in those particular regions. If you can't get off work for one and you're doing this on your own, then by all means, choose an EMEA or APAC time zone if you're in North America, and it just means staying up late one night, unfortunately.
So I'm seeing Mike just asked there, if you've only taken the level 2 course as an example, can you take the labs for level 1 or level 3?
So labs, we don't have labs locked down in that case, right? If we'd obviously like to talk to you if you wanted to come in and only do labs for L3. But something I answered earlier, there was a question about prerequisites for ACE level 1 as an example. But let's use that prerequisite across the board. The only prerequisites in this entire program is at level 7, in which you must be level 6 certified first. And in taking an exam, you must have taken some type of training for that level or above, right? So if you've taken level 2 and you want to sit the level 2 exam, great, that works. Level 1 exam, great, that works. But doing labs in level 3 would not qualify you for having training at level 3 in order to sit the exam. So we'd obviously want to talk to you, find out why the labs were the only thing you'd want at that point. To expand on that a little bit further, while we've called these levels, we go through from 1 to 5, it feels like you must start at level 1 and move your way up. That's incorrect. We understand, Arista understands that a lot of people are coming with current certifications, with current knowledge in the workplace. You're free to start wherever you feel like you need to start. We find ACE level 3 is usually that place because of the knowledge that most people have of layer 2 network design, but it's different for everybody. So if you came in and started at ACE level 3 and took an exam for ACE level 3, there's no reason for you to back up and need to review things you already know at level 1 or level 2.
And so if you get to be level 3 certified, you're essentially level 1 or level 2 certified, or at least
right.
Feel that you can have the equivalent knowledge.
Right, absolutely. Even if you took training from ACE level 1, 2, and 3, you could skip the exams in level 1, level 2, take your exam at level 3, pass that, you're certified. While the courses build, the exams do as well. As an example, VLANs won't be taught in ACE level 3, but they're taught at a lower level. You're still going to need to know what and how to configure a VLAN in ACE level 3.
Absolutely.
So that's another question here. Do I have to take level 1 and level 2? No. None of this is required as far as starting points or exams to take. But once you're certified at a level, you're assumed to be certified everything below as well.
And
What about if we're already a customer of Arista? Reach out to us, Sunset or SDN Pros, or even your Arista SE or AM if you already have a contact with them. There are obviously partner discounts with all of these courses, but just being a customer of Arista, really all that means is you should probably look at the training a little more and make sure that you and your coworkers or employees are up to speed on everything.
And so then, Todd, you're asking, for example, the layer 3 exam, is there a troubleshooting section or is it all configured from scratch? It's all configured from scratch on the devices, right?
Yep. Troubleshooting is if you configured something wrong.
Yep.
Right?
If you miss something in there, you're gonna have to do your troubleshooting and make sure you know how to fix it.
Yep. And that's why the time limits we have are the key component of pressure on you. A lot of people will hear open book. Oh, that's going to be easy. I'll bring all my notes. I'll bring all my configurates from training. I've gone through all these labs. I understand what they're asking in those. And keep in mind, our exam scenarios, they're built directly off of our courses and labs. We're not looking to trick anybody. We're not looking to throw things in that you didn't learn about, or it was a corner case that somebody talked about in the class. None of that. If it was in the training, if it was in the labs, expect it to be on the exams, and nothing more. But the time limits, that's your biggest pressure point. Open book, open note, Google. All we really say is you can't have anybody else helping you. But if you configure something wrong and you spend 30 minutes troubleshooting before you move on to the next session, then your time starts ticking down pretty quickly.
Yep. It starts wearing on you as well. So you definitely start making your own troubleshooting problems after that. So
yep, absolutely. Yep. Validity of the certification after getting certified. I'm guessing, where is this held and how can it be checked? So SDN Pros and Arista partners with Credly right now. Cisco does as well. So most of you that have Cisco certifications would know what this is. And that's a way that you can get a badge that you can share on LinkedIn, share on your social accounts, and obviously have a manager or a future work prospect check on that. Right now, to expand a little bit further, our certifications are 1 year certifications, not 2 or 3 like most other vendors. But that's because Arista is also looking at a recertification process that does not include retaking an exam. We don't have a lot to talk about that today, as that's still in the process of being finalized and released. But just know that once you're certified at a level, Arista is not going to expect you to take that exam again every year or every couple of years. There will be other ways to recertify. If you have taken a class, how long do you get the digital book? The book is yours forever. We plan on updating books as the courses are updated, which means that, let's say you take a course now in June, you can expect minor updates for at least the next 12 months. You will not receive a major update. And at that point, after 12 months is up, you won't receive any other updates after that.
But you still have access to the book for as long as you want.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a digital book as well. We've taken the steps of going just about all digital, all online, all virtual. And right now, all the books are distributed through a platform called Mimeo, Digital Rights Manager. And you're able to take notes in the book. It looks like a PDF. You just can't download, you can't save for later, you can't transfer to somebody else. Your book is yours. How many scenarios will be in the exam or questions roughly? So let's start with the questions one. There's no questions because it's not a multiple choice. It's not a memorization exam. There's no actual questions here. As far as the scenarios, we've worked out a way through some automation to now give us almost 2,000 unique scenarios for every level. The scenario, however, includes multiple topics, multiple technologies. So your scenario isn't just configure BGP. you're configuring a network. So whatever the network is required of you in that scenario, building the IP schema, the underlay, the overlay, maybe there's a firewall in one scenario and not in another, that sort of thing. This is great. Lots of questions.
Yeah.
I figured when we got into the practical nature of these exams, this is where most of this comes from. A lot of this, by the way, guys, too, is it's in the what is core section. Remember, core stands for exams in this case. And feel free to look around. There's resources by both Sunset Learning and SDN Pros that you can reach out to and get some more questions answered as well. Certifications exam duration. Do you want to go to the core page there, Russell? All time limits for certifications are going to be right here on this page. Pricing. What does it mean for open book? Go ahead, click there on the last one, individual core time limits. 2 hours at level 1, 4 hours at levels 2, 3, and 5, and 5 hours at level 4. CVP is another course we're not talking about today, but that's specifically for Cloud Vision. It's complete Cloud Vision exam. That one's 2 hours as well. And then this right here is how we grade, adding the human element into grading. You're not going to fail for typos. We're going to do everything we can to help you pass in that case. You mentioned proctoring earlier, Russell. I wanted to answer something else about that. The proctor's not there to obviously help you with your configuration, walk you through from one step to the next, explain what this section is compared to that section. They're mainly there to make sure that you understand your times remaining, obviously, host the Zoom session so that you have somebody there. And when you run into an issue, figure out as quickly as possible whether it's a you issue, meaning configuration, and it's just, sorry, you're going to have to reread the instructions and keep going, or if it's a lab issue. Because these labs are virtual, because we're doing these exams online through Zoom, we understand that there can be issues there in which a switch doesn't work properly, CVP doesn't boot up, GCP fails, maybe we lose everything. So you're not going to lose time for things like that, and that's why the proctor is primarily there. We'll get to the bottom of it. We'll try to fix it if there's a fix. We've actually had some people where the lab just, it went awry. 2 hours have already passed in a 4-hour exam. It didn't make sense to give a new lab out and have them start over. So we scrapped that one and allowed them to come back for another exam attempt, and all was well after that. So we take everything into consideration.
And just before anybody happens to take off, I know we're kind of winding down here. Just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that we've also got a special offer. So Sunset Learning is offering 20% off on all Arista courses from 1 through 5. As you see, it's the promo code ACE20 there. And this involves, as they show, the 5 levels. They include the idea of instructor-led courses, proctored exams, the certifications that are available for us. So just kind of getting everything out there. And again, if you go through and throw out, Eden threw out SDN Pros website, it's sdn-pros.com as well. Again, sdnpros.com/exams is where you're going to see a lot of this. But again, you can just go to SDN Pros. I was looking at their website here. Again, right up here at the training, they have all the information about training. What is core is basically the exams that you're going to be taking. Okay, and how you go through and register that as well. So some good stuff that we have available for us.
Yep. Yeah. One thing to mention here, this is obviously being put on, Russell, by you and Sunset Learning. Sunset Learning is an elite partner of Arista. Therefore, they can teach ACE levels 1 through 5. But all book management, all lab management, all exams are held specifically through sdn-pros.com. SDN Pros and Arista maintains all of that in order to ensure that Arista has the final word and everything.
Sure enough, and we're glad to be partners with you guys as well. So
Yep, we as well. We can't do what we're doing right now without you guys helping spread the word.
All right, well, that's pretty much what we have for you guys. If you guys have any other questions, please bring them up in Q&A or in the chat. But other than that, I think that we are good to go. So thank you guys for your guys' time, and thanks for showing up and listen to our little presentation here.
Yep, feel free to use the website to reach out to anybody at sdnpros.com, and we'll help you with next steps.
Absolutely. And thank you, Shawn, for being here.
Sure thing, no problem.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.